episode of New Orleans Basketball and New Orleans Network podcast. As always, I am your host, Rafael Rella, joined by my fellow middle brother, Garrett G. Melder. What's popping with you, bro? We in the finals.
OKC is in the finals. Indiana's in the finals. Yeah, man. Yeah, we finally got to finals. I think everybody is like, you know, it's polarizing, right? Because it's like, on one hand, if you live in a small market, right, and you're looking at all of these teams, you know, throughout the years that have been super teams and built through the purchasing of players and things like that, you look at it as kind of like it's the revenge, right? Like revenge of the nerds, right? Because you got this basketball-centric finals, no storylines, right? Like obviously Shea winning MVP is the storyline, but like there is no, you know, hey, what does this do for the legacy of anything? This is just straight up two teams, two cities, two markets that have been dying for basketball relevancy. One has gone through the trenches of the draft and, you know, accumulating draft picks and sent off stars, and then the other one has just kind of been grinding their way and not kind of they traded their main player and then kind of rebuilt on the fly, not really tearing it down to the stud. So I mean, it's interesting to see this difference in the finals. We're a long way from Boston versus Los Angeles Lakers. But I'm excited about it. I think there's going to be a lot of styles make fights in this one, where a lot of pushing of the ball up the court might help some people, but it also might play into the hands of other players. And so it's gonna be good, man. I'm actually really excited about this finals because I'm a hoop junkie, and I want to see, the thing that makes the Pacers good is also the thing that OKC thrives in, right? And so I just want to see how that goes. I'm interested in seeing how it goes, man. Obviously the W is rolling. Commissioner's Cup just tipped off. I'll be in Dallas to go see the Wings just this upcoming week, so I'm excited about that. And as you know, as always, New Orleans is in the media, and you just can't find a way. Will it ever be normal in the city of New Orleans? I think the answer is no. So outside of that, man, I'm blessed. Everything is all good, man. What up, Michael Morgan? What up, San Diego, man? That's love. I'm excited. I'm eventually going to that city. I hear it's beautiful.
It's a great city.
And I
love
there.
San Diego.
Yeah, I can't wait to go. But outside of that, everything's good on my end, bro. How's everything on your side?
Everything is blessed. It's the summertime. It's hot as hell already.
Hot as hell.
The braids have come in for my kids. We're ready to get popping on the summer sports. But yeah, you hit it on the head as far as the matchup coming up. No, the Pelicans are not in the finals. And yes, OKC had a team taken away, and then New Orleans played in OKC and still made it to the finals before. Anyway, small market teams are here. Someone's getting their first championship. One of the small market teams is getting their first championship. One of the stars getting their first championship. So to your point, I'm super excited about it. The thing that stands out the most to me out of this series is that the Pacers are heavy underdogs and the Thunder are heavy favorites, because if you started the playoffs and you said, which team do you think will end up here? I think a lot of people would have picked the Thunder. I don't think anybody would have picked the Pacers. So the Thunder are heavy favorites and probably should be coming out a much tougher West. But I think for every middle school, high school, AAU, college coach that's ever told you, son, defense wins championship, I think you're about to see that in this series. I think the whole spread you out, when you've got a team of 10 guys that can lock you down or both. To your point, I'm just interested to see what that is. And I'll tell you what, if things go the way that things or project to go in this series, I think Willie Green and Joe Dumars and BIC, I told you. I told you defense wins championships. I told you this is how you win. So we go draft a player or we go trade for a player who's defensive focused. And everybody's like, oh, no, not again. They're going to say, well, look what you got to be in OKC. So I just anticipate that piece going into. And before we jump into the Pelicans and all their madness that they can't seem to escape, even though the season's been over for months, make sure you guys will follow us on X, on Twitter, on IG, as TikTok. That's NO Basketball, no E. Make sure you're liking the episode below. If you're not already, make sure you subscribe to the channel, New Orleans Basketball. So, in natural fashion, it's crazy. Even though Brandon Ingram is no longer a part of the Pelicans franchise, in the same week that Brandon Ingram just randomly gets slaughtered by national podcasts out of nowhere that he hasn't played all season long, accusations come out about Zion Williamson. They're non-criminal accusations. They're not great. Some of the things that are being said about him in a lot of ways. This is not what you wanted to see right after the Pelicans sent Zion to the podium to represent them in the draft lottery that went the opposite way that they would like it to go. This is not what you wanted to see going into a franchise or into an offseason where half the team is injured, half the team is probably going to be gone. Like, there's just so much uncertainty. And the one thing you were banking on was that the superstar that you had finally had the light bulb turned on for him. Let me ask you this question. Obviously, again, accusations are what they are, whether they're true or whether they're not. From the now there's two young ladies who have been a part of this. What do you think this means in terms of Zion with the franchise, not only this offseason, but like long term? Do you think either the Pelicans are very much involved and they understand and they're going to help Zion fight or whatnot? Or do you think this increases or decreases the likelihood that he's going to be with this team, not just this offseason, but moving forward?
Well, first and foremost, I want to say, those allegations are absolutely putrid and awful. And I'll let the court speak for itself and let everything play out and do the things that needs to be done. However, those are terrible, terrible accusations for anybody. And so, I really hope that it's not true and that that he didn't do it. But those accusations are awful. And I just want to put that out there. I think, listen, the NBA, as bad as it sounds and as terrible as it sounds, has shown you that, these type of things don't deviate, players' careers the way that you would think that it should, if the allegations are true. We see with Kevin Porter Jr., rolling with the Clippers. Miles Bridges just got a brand new contract with the Hornets. And so, obviously, the NBA does what it does, right? And whether you think it's right or not, it's just what happens. And I think, this is a situation where, it's the track record that is really, really bad because of what is all going on with Zion, since he literally stepped foot, on the NBA court. And so, I think, the Pelicans are going to do their due diligence, obviously, and let the courts play out and let, that whatever decisions and judges make whatever decisions that they need to make. But I don't think, if this is something that he is going to, come out of, I don't know what that means. But if he comes out on the other side of this, I don't think that it changes, for the Pelicans. I think that they already know that Zion has been going through a lot of stuff, and they are very aware of the headache. They're very aware of the headache that this has brought upon them. But I do think that this is a situation where the Pelicans, they had to have known at least some part of this. Zion had to have known at some part of this. The statement come from his representatives talking about how he reported this extortion attempt, their words, to the law enforcement. So this is something he knew, right? This didn't shock him at all. And so I'm sure they know. And so to me personally, I think Obviously, if he doesn't come out on the other side of this, there will be other questions. There will be other questions and other things that he will have to deal with outside of basketball. Is he going to be playing basketball? But if he does make it on the other side of this, I don't think it changes anything for the Pelicans because I know I've watched the NBA, throughout the years, kind of just say, oh, that's bad. If he's not going to jail, then, play on.
Right. The thing I look at it, and again, like if you just kind of follow the sign seems as if, again, Zion's kind of turning that corner, right? Where you saw it at the end of the season, the physical shape, the seriousness, the maturity, which we've talked about on this podcast, the Pelicans doubling down on him since the draft. Something tells me the Pelicans, I see it in the comments from Michael, something tells me that the Pelicans knew about this stuff before it goes public. Like, I understand Twitter or X is very popular, but like the NBA is more popular and more prominent. And so they probably have access to information even before Twitter and things like that. And so like the thing that I lean on, and the biggest problem I think with this whole thing, outside of this very serious allegations that are happening, is that there's always something going on with Zion. Like there's always something outside of just focusing on his game altogether. And like eventually that becomes a distraction. And like Jose kind of talked about it, and Trey kind of talked about it in the last season. Like, we keep talking about potential. We keep talking about this, that, and the other. But eventually you got to do something. You got to win something. And like at this point, again, the dominoes seem to be going in his favor outside of this coming out of nowhere from that standpoint. But like at some point you have to become the leader. And if these allegations are not true, you need to come out like publicly and say, this is not what I'm about. This is not who I'm trying to be. And like, you need to create a different brand for yourself. Because at some point, people are eventually going to start leaning the other direction in terms of your character and your brand and things like that. And for a team that's looking to galvanize itself after trading off Brandon Ingram and kind of reshifting the face of the franchise and reshifting the direction with David Griffin being out and Joe Dumars being in and things like that, you need a stable leader. And again, I'm not sure if it's not Zion, who that's going to be, right? It may be Trey, but like who that's going to be within this team, and it needs to be Zion. And so, with all of that being said, and with all of that kind of going into this offseason, what the Pelicans need to do from now, I think, honestly, it decreases the likelihood that Zion's going to be traded because now your value is lower because now people are uncertain about what's going on. And so if you weren't trying to trade him anyway because no one was blowing you away with offers, I don't think that now is the time. And they're definitely not going to cut him. So like now is the time to go say, well, we're just through. Let's take pennies for it because you got the number 7 pick. You didn't get Cooper Flag. You got the number 7 pick. And so now it's not like you even have an option to say, okay, well, we're going to rebuild and blow this thing up and build it around Concanipple. Like that's not what's going to happen in this scenario. And so to your point, I think things are going to play out one way or the other. And I think this is the opportunity, especially if the allegations are not true and things like that, for Zion to really show his true leadership when it comes to that. So there's a big problem with the Pelicans. They're kind of stuck in building the team around Trey Murphy and Zion. So they need this to go away in some fashion if it's not true. But outside of that, they don't have a lot of options to pivot because like, if you want to blow it up, like we've talked about before, Trey Murphy is not 19 and like Herb Jones is not 20 years old, and like the league is getting younger and younger, so eventually you're gonna have to capitalize on the talent that you have. So let's talk about that talent and transition from that big problem to the Pelican size problem. So last episode we talked about the guards and how there was a overabundance of guards on this team and all different skill sets, all different contract lengths, all different ages. When we get to the wings and bigs of the Pelicans, let me go through the list for you. You have Trey Murphy, who, again, is coming off of a very serious injury, his second one in 2 years after the meniscus. Just got a new contract, showed a lot of things. You have Herb Jones, who, again, coming off of another serious injury that took him out the majority of the year. And that's where the list ends for you, Derik. Keon Brooks is on a 2-year contract. Jeremiah Robinson-Earl is a free agent. So talk to me. How do the Pelicans approach the size issue they have on the wing position? Because 2 years ago, you coined the team Wingstop, and now you're looking around and it's like there's not a lot of guys that are 6'8" to 6'10" on this roster.
Yeah, it's great. It's not great. It's just, it's crazy how far we are away from Wingstop. It feels like it just was yesterday, but you look at this roster and it's like, dang, like they are bereft. And it seems as though as the NBA got bigger, the Pelicans were like, we're just gonna go ahead and get a little smaller. So one of the things that works out for the Pelicans when you talk about wing position is the fact that it's very similar to how a problem like the Lakers had, right? Where they didn't have a big man. Like they had Jackson Hayes, which anybody who watched the Pelicans knows that Jackson Hayes is not your answer at the big man position. But the way they were able to play defense, at a pretty decent rate was because they had positional size other different places, right? So yeah, they don't have a center, but like their point guard is Luka, and he's like 6'8", 6'7", 6'8", 6'9". And you have next to him, you have LeBron, and you have Rui Hachimura, who's a big stout guy, and you have all of these different, Dorian Finney-Smith, a whole bunch of like wings and big guards and things like that. And the Pelicans, to their point, to their credit, they have a similar thing, right? Like the reason we don't talk about this podcast doesn't talk about Zion in the wing position because we believe that he's better usage at the guard position. And then obviously he's a bigger guard. It's going to be hard for a traditional guard to guard Zion. It's going to be damn near impossible to do it. And then DeJounte is the same way, right? Another guard, but he's got long arms and he's wiry and things like that. And then obviously after that is where you start having CJ and Jose and smaller guards. So you have a bit of positional size when you talk about the guard position, as far as size on the floor. But we are seeing right now in the NBA, like I said last podcast, you have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's Thunder and Tyrese Halliburton's Pacers in the finals, right? Who just beat Anthony Edwards' Timberwolves and Jalen Brunson's Knicks. So you have these guard power teams where we've so often seen Jason Tatum in the finals, LeBron in the finals, Kawhi in the finals, Giannis in the finals.
Luka.
It's always been the big wing kind of ball handling guy in there, right? And then obviously you have the freak of nature, which is Jokic. But I think what you see in these teams that's in the finals is that they have a ton of guys that can play, that play bigger, that have longer, wingspans and things. You have Pascal Siakam, you have Nembhard, you have Aaron Nesmith, right? And on the other side, you have Lou Dort, and you have J-Dub, and you have Case and Wallace, like guys who are tall, and Alex Caruso, guys who are tall and got long arms and can get into different things. And so you do need those wing positions. And so that's why, when you look at what we were talking about on the draft, when we were, in the previous podcast, we were talking about like not going for guys like a Jeremiah Fears, as talented as he may be. You just don't have the luxury of, taking a chance on a smaller player when so much of your team is wiry, and even the bigs on the team, Yves and Karlo, like even those guys are wiry and not solid big guys, or things like that. And so it's really Zion and no one else. So this is an opportunity, whether it's through the draft or through the offseason, you have to address that. That has to be part of your addressing this team, because you're going to run into a lot of the same situations that you ran into last season. And then on top of that, you might be going into the season without Trey Murphy starting, without Herbs being there, without DeJounte being there. So even the vertical size that you have when you talk about tall, long weight, a lot of those guys might not even be out there. So you're going to be a tiny, tiny team outside of Zion, as far as, size and strength. And so this is something they absolutely have to address.
Yeah. a couple of things I point out, and you touched on a little bit. So, like you think about Trey and you think about Herb, and again, positionally, they are longer, athletic, the type of guys that you need in today's NBA. But to your point, the way either one of them scored, I mean, Herb on the defensive end and Trey on the offensive end, is not through like power, right? A lot of it is through either finesse or just pure athleticism in a lot of ways. And to your point about the playoffs, like a lot of the finesse goes away. Like when you get into round 3 and you get into round 4 and you get into you're at the finals, like guys are just bullying their way to the rim. Like some of those games in the Pacers Knicks series, like they're not even running plays. Like Cat was just trying to go through Miles Turner's chest over and over and over. And like if you look at Herb and Trey, they because they can't do other things with the ball for big parts of the summer, they might be in the gym eating weights and things like that. But they're never going to be like the size of Julius Randle. They're never going to be the size of Isaiah Hartenstein. And so, like, the likelihood that they're going to, like, withstand that beating over and over and over is low. We just talked about Zion being more guardish than wing forwardish. I don't think you want him going through that over and over, especially with his injury history. And so, like, if you look at the team, I do like what you saw out of Keon Brooks at the end of the season. I think that's someone you bring back, but not someone you rely on saying, like, he's in our rotation. Someone you bring back to compete and to steal a spot, very similar to Najee and things like that, because he has a little bit of size. Like, there was a little bit of weight behind him. And, like, when you just look at this Pelicans roster, there's just not a whole lot of that belongs. And so outside of just the bodies and the size and the mass, like you need another score, like another downhill score, because when Zion goes out or when Trey goes out, that's when like the Pelicans offense goes out, because no one else it has either the strength or I don't want to say the ability, but the skill set to consistently attack the rim either by force or by craft or whatever that may be. And so I think in terms of what this Pelicans roster has really been missing outside of the size is another big body scorer, someone who can either create their own or be able to score when given advantageous positions in the post.
You know what this reminds. So you know who needs to be listening to this podcast, this episode? It should be Willie Green, because I remember there was a time that there was a big body guy who could score in the paint at will, and they played OKC, and they just would not give him the ball. They just would not do it. When you had it there was a time last year or the year before, whatever it was, the year before that, where it was coming to the end of the season, and I said, your people who watch Jonas Valanciunas it's gonna remind them of Drew Brees. And everybody was like, what you mean by that? I was like, there was times when you used to watch the Saints and you would be like, okay, I know the court. I'm not even worried about the quarterback position because I know what I'm going to get from there. Let's see what everything else does. That's what JV was for the Pelicans. He was a force. And so, like, you went into games like, oh, we're not even worried about the center position. Like, you know what you're going to get. You're going to get 15 and 10 or 20 and 11 or something like that, because that's just what he's going to do. And that was if Zion sits, if Trey sits, you could always just throw the thing to JV. And now that he's gone, it's like, damn, they really did have that, and it's not there no more. And it's like, wow, this is what it feels like to not have like an inside presence outside of your star player, or to have any kind of downhill production. This is what it feels like. And yeah, this is what it feels like. And so I go back to the game in Las Vegas last year, the play-in tournament last year, the quarterfinals, semifinals, conference final, whatever you call it for the play-in tournament, where the Pelicans were coming into the game, and Herb Jones was about to be first team all defense, and he was just this stud defender. Everybody knew him. He had just put it on, on display in the round before. And then the first tip they threw the ball in the air. The Lakers won the tip off. LeBron turned the corner, put his shoulder in Herb Jones, scored and won. Herb hit the floor. LeBron did this. And I texted you that time. And I said, the game is over, because who else is guarding LeBron on this team other than Herb? And he just put Herb on the floor and one. Why? Because they don't have a lot of girth. They don't have a lot of size, of body strength. And that is what you run into. It's why we discussed, even when we talked on the Hawks podcast, when we were talking about Dyson Daniels, and you were saying for a while that like Dyson might be a better defender on guys like Luka and LeBron and all of that. And it was like, well, Herb was first team all defense. How was that possible? Well, it was because he had more strength. He had a bigger frame to take some of that abuse and some of the stuff that you talk about in playoffs, where people are going to you at force by force and chest to chest over and over again. That hurts after a while, man. And the first thing that goes when you start getting tired like that is your legs and your shot, and it affects a whole bunch of other things. And so if you're just relying on Herb and Trey just to be the wings and to get downhill and to play like that over and over again, either they have to bulk up or you have to think about other ways to generate offense or how you can infuse this team with some strength and some
Couldn't
size.
agree more. So outside of just size at the 4 position, I think you need, whether it's at the 4, and I guess that's a great transition into the bigs of the team, or the 5. I think you just need bodies. I think you need a 4 and a 5 to be added to this team. The skill set can either come from the 4 or the 5, but you need just bigger bodies on this team in general. And so we talked about Yves, Missi, who was awarded second team all rookie for the 21st pick of the draft. That's not too bad for this team. Mm-hmm. You and I have talked about this. Yves had an incredible start to the year, even though everything went to hell for the Pelicans. He had a great start to the year. He was looking like the front runner for the rookie year, and then he kind of hit that rookie wall and kind of leveled out toward the end. Where are your thoughts on you? Obviously, there's a lot of discourse because of where the Pelicans are drafted and who's available, which we'll get to in a second. But like, where do you see kind of the next step for Yves being? Do you think it's that, hey man, he could flirt with the All-Star one day? Or do you think it's, hey, he's going to be, a Clint Capella Jr.?
Yeah, Yves was the tale of last year's Pelicans team, right? Just really difficult to get any kind of information on him, because when he played with DeJounte and had a little bit of a guard that could do some things with him, he looked phenomenal. He was a great lob catcher, a great, obviously, shot blocker, the things that you were begging for the center position to do, when JV was there and Larry Nance was there. Yves did all of that. And then as time went on, you started to see some of the things that you were worried about coming into his rookie season from the draft, right? His lack of ability to create any kind of offense at all. Obviously, again, there was a lot less talent on the floor, so it's not all his fault. But a lot of things that you saw was, not his ability not to score, his ability. He took 0 shots outside in the 3-point line, like none, 0, not one. We took the same amount. And like you saw him get pushed around a little bit, right? With it, because he's not a big guy. He's not, hasn't gotten to that point. And you knew that. You knew coming into this league that he was raw. And that you didn't know if he was going to be able to, start and contribute. And then he had to, and he did a decent job. I think the one thing that I want to see, we talk about it off the pod a lot. Yves has a lot of, again, he's raw, and he has a lot of like learning the game for the first time. A lot of those moments happened in his rookie season. I'm hoping that he learned those things. So one of the things that I want to see him take the next step with is the feel for the game, right? If the play calls for you to set a screen and then kind of like screen off of one person and then go run and screen to another person. Well, if you screen for your guard or your player and they run and trap him, you don't have to just turn your back and go run and screen for another person. Roll to the rim, get some of that intuition, that feel for the game. Where it's like, I know I'm supposed to set a double screen, but they doubled Zion, they doubled DeJounte coming off the pick. Let me just roll to the rim and be tall, right? As opposed to, let me turn around and go find somebody else to screen, and let me somebody else to screen. There's been times where you saw them dump the ball to him, whether there's a mismatch or he has position on his guy, where he should be able to just turn around and, he's freakishly athletic, jump up and dunk, where there's times where he caught it and he doesn't even look at the rim. He's just right back out, coming back for the screen. Like, That's what I want to see. That comes with playing time. And again, he didn't get a lot of opportunities to play with starters in the regular players. And hopefully, just that trial by fire kind of pointed some things out, coach and work with him. But that's what I want to see, because if that doesn't get there, his ceiling is gonna be what it is, right? He'll always be a great shot blocker because he has great defensive instincts. And he'll be a decent rebounder because, again, he has good instincts. As he gets bigger, hit those rebounds, I think, and stronger, those rebounds will get better as well. But I think if he doesn't get a little bit of fluidity to the way he understands and plays the game, to where he can read and react, because again, when you're on the floor, if we always talk about if they could just get healthy. But if you're on the floor with Zion and Trey and Herb and DeJounte and maybe CJ and these guys, they're not going to guard you. And so you have to make sure that you're making teams pay for that, because you're going to end up on the bench for for the other guys on the team who might be able to affect the game, in a different way. And so I do see him as a right now as a really, really good role player and a serviceable starting center. I think he's he'll be a really good role player or a serviceable starting center. But if he can kind of flesh out some of those parts of his game, some of that intuition where he's dunking over and over again because you're leaving him open and he's playing off of that, then I think that is where that growth coming, where he can take another step. But I very much enjoyed watching Yves play. I very much enjoyed watching him kind of figure things out on the fly. Again, this is a guy who's super duper raw as far as the NBA goes and as far as the game of basketball goes. So I give him a lot of runway and a lot of leeway for what's going on, especially with the season from hell last year. But I would like to see him kind of get a little bit more fluid in his feet and a little bit more fluid in his mind when he's processing the game.
I kind of disagree. And here's why. I saw Yves in Baylor. I watched every single Baylor game once the Pelicans drafted it. I watched him in the summer league. I watched him in the preseason. I watched him in the season. And who he was just one summer ago to who he finished the season at is a drastic improvement for me. And to your point, it's much easier, especially for a center position, especially a young center, a raw young center. We just saw it with Jackson Hayes. It's very hard for those guys to thrive when they don't have talent that can get them the ball in advantageous situations. And even without that being available, there were spurts in the season where Yves was giving you 20 and 10 and dominant in that set. So I'm going to steal something from Bill Parcells and Sean Payton. Confidence comes from demonstrated ability. I think Yves' biggest issue, other than size, that he needs to grow. I mean, you could say that for everyone on the roster outside of Zion. He needs to grow. But the second part of that is confidence. Like, there were times where, to your point, he just didn't have, he would miss a shot and then not shoot again for times and times again. When there's no penalty, the Pelicans won 14 games. They didn't win a lot of games. So what is the downside? And toward the end of the season, I think that was kind of the message when everyone sat down for whatever injury at the end, where the Pelicans basically mailed it in. Yves was like, oh yeah, I'm the only person out here. And then he started giving you some of those higher performance games. And I think going into the summer, after what you just saw, his propensity to learn and to adapt and to grow, I think if you give him another offseason, I know he tweeted the other day, or he had a post the other day, he was in New Orleans looking at tape, working out. I think he's the type of player that's going to get to that. I'm going to maximize my potential, because there were some things from Yves that I saw that you would never see out of Jackson Hayes. You never saw out of some of these developmental players that never really developed. There was a lot of things that showed in flashes, and I think that there's a high potential with him, especially if you continue to surround him with talent, so that you get those high flying moments and he gets the confidence behind them. Now, it's crazy that we say that, and what's even more crazy is that going into last season, the narrative was the Pelicans have no center. But the crazy thing on top of that is that, as excited as I am about seeing Yves in year 2 and what type of growth and development that he adds to his game, I might be just as excited in Karlo Matkovic, because you and I have talked on this podcast about there are elements to Karlo's game that I think are more beneficial that time than Yves Missi at different things, just because of how he complements a Zion Williamson, how he complements a Trey Murphy, because of his ability to shoot. He also is very athletic. He also can finish at the rim. He has some nasty dunks, some nasty putbacks in himself. He also can shot block. So it's just so happens that Yves is probably more dangerous athlete near the rim, but Karlo's more dangerous outside of it. And if that guy, who also was considered a rookie, even though he's 23 himself, if that guy can take another step in his development, who I also think his biggest problem outside of with Yves is both size and confidence. If those two guys just lock themselves in the gym all summer long and just beat the hell out of each other and try to get more and more confident into terms of who they can be, I'm excited to see what they're developing, because I think there's a lot of things that they can add to the offense that, again, just wasn't prevalent last year because you just didn't have the tools to be able to expose those things, to be able to use those things. What are your thoughts on Karlo? How do you see him fitting into the equation going into next season?
Yeah, I think that's who I'm most excited about coming into this season. Like, again, I kind of know what I'm gonna get from Zion, and when Trey gets there, and Karlo is the guy that I'm like, if he can reach, not even, I would love for him to reach his highest ceiling, his potential, his highest ceiling. But if he can just reach the ceiling that the Pelicans need him to reach, meaning he's taking 5, 6 threes a game, he's down there banging and rebounding, and doing things like that, where, you know, if you go into these close games and you say to yourself, okay, the 5 that need to be on the floor, you know, Zion needs to be there, you know, Trey needs to be there, you probably 90% sure need to have Herb there, and you're probably going to have some version of CJ or DeJounte. You know, I'm talking about when and if, again, you know, but if everybody's there, then like that 5th spot becomes very interesting, whether it's, you know, 2 guards and DeJounte and CJ, or if it's Yves because you need the defensive, you know, at rim running thing, or Karlo. And I think Karlo is the answer in a lot of those situations, because he gives you, you know, maybe not as good shooting as CJ, obviously not as prolific a shooter as CJ, and not the perimeter defense that you would get from DeJounte Murray, and maybe not the freak athlete that Yves Missi is, but he gives you a little bit of all of that, right? Shooting, athleticism, as well as being able to switch. Like, he can move his feet in situations. And so I think he is the answer for that if he can get to that position. We saw him, you know, when everybody was out again, like, look like the guy, like they were running offense through him for a little bit and things like that. And so if that is the situation, if you can get that kind of guy along paired up with a guy like Kelly Olynyk, where you just have a bunch of weird pieces that can answer a lot of questions. That's what the Pacers are doing. The Pacers are just throwing people out there to plug certain problems. The Thunder are doing the same thing. Oh, you got 2 bigs, or you're not playing big, you're going super small. We're going to sit Isaiah Hartenstein down and plug in Case and Wallace. We're going to sit a 7-foot center down and put in a guard. You just have to have a lot of different answers, and it may not come in, okay, I need to take a center down and put a center in. You can have a guy like Karlo go in there and play the 5. We saw him play the 4, him and Yves together with Zion closer to that guard position, then closer to that forward center position, when you have 2 bigs on the floor. And that's something, because of Karlo's ability to move around the floor and shoot and play above the rim, that he can space the floor for Yves Missi, right? And that imagine having Karlo spacing the floor and Zion turning a Trey Murphy screen going down low. The big has to step up on Zion. That's a lob to Yves, and your center is somewhere over there sitting with Karlo Matkovic. So I think that in of itself is a key piece for the Pelicans, and that's why I'm super excited to see what Karlo can do the next season, because there were a lot of things. Some of the things that you talked about with Yves is what I saw with Karlo, where I was like, that's interesting, because that can work with anybody on the floor. And so those are the things that I'm going to be looking forward to with Karlo moving in into his, you know, his next year here with the Pelicans. And I am super excited to see how he can fit in, you know, and bring this whatever his improved skill set, because that's a guy you don't hear about. You don't see. He just comes to work and does his work. So I'm excited about Karlo.
Again, when he was in the G League getting like 30 and 10, and I'm like, Garrick, the Pelicans don't have anybody who can get rebounds. Why isn't Karlo playing? And then he got in. You're like, oh, okay. Again, like with both of those guys, I just want to see them go in the next season not turning down shots, right? Both of them, either Karlo at the 3-point line or Yves in the paint, either one of them having, I would much rather have to dial you back than to have to push you forward. And so if they can turn that notch, I think that's a big win for the Pelicans. Now, you mentioned Kelly Olynyk. He's got a $13 million expiring contract, which, again, maybe that comes into play in terms of this offseason and what the Pelicans tried to do. But for what I saw from Kelly Olynyk, and again, everybody knows who Kelly Olynyk is. He's been basically the same player since he's been in the NBA. That fit next to Zion, it just fits too well, right? In terms of his skill set, his ability, his on-court IQ, and how he's a kind of a point guard at the four position, like that is what you've been looking for the Nicola Mellis and the Miritiges and the different European intername 6'9", 6'10" forward that the Pelicans have been signing every single year for the past 7 years. That's what you've been looking for. And to your point with Karlo Matkovic, who's a better person to learn from of how to kind of play that hybrid 4-5 position than Kelly Olynyk as a role player. And so I think the Pelicans would be, I don't want to say challenged to move him, but I think that's again, we talk about the veteran guys that you want to keep around for your young guys to learn. Kelly Olynyk is one of those guys that you might not have to play him on some nights, but you know when he goes in, he's going to give you something, and it's going to be something additive to the team. I saw it earlier in the comments when they mentioned, hey, look at what is happening in the NBA today. Almost every team's got 2 bigs, 2 7-footers, wherever it may be. Well, we just talked through the 3 centers, and that's it. So you're one injury away from having to call Daniel Tice from, again, wherever he is and saying, do you want to unretire again? Right? God, no. I look at OKC, who, again, is going to be the person that every single team is looking to model and looking to be. They got Chet and Isaiah Hartenstein. They're not going nowhere no time soon. Okay, Denver, they got Jokic and Aaron Gordon. They're not going nowhere no time soon. Minnesota, they got Rudy and Julius Randle, who might be going somewhere, but something tells me they're going to have another tall person at the 4 position for Anthony Edwards, whether it's Naz Reid or whomever. Dallas has AD, has Derik Lively. They got every center ever. They got Cooper Flag. They got nothing but guys who are 6'10" and up. And then the Spurs have Wemby, who counts as 2 centers by himself on the court. Those are the teams you got to go through in the West just to get to where the Thunder are and where the Pacers are right now in the finals. And so if you look at those teams, the league is getting bigger everywhere you look at it. And for you only have 3 guys that are 6'10", 6'11", and like maybe 7 foot. Like, I think you got to add another defensive 7-footer to that mix, whether it's a high caliber player, whether it's, someone you stash at the end of the bench, just something to keep you from having to break in case of emergency glass if a center goes down. That's not a good feeling, especially where the NBA is going. So that brings us to the draft and what is in front of the Pelicans and the options at 7. So we talked last podcast about the guards and how, there was different skill sets and they all could be really good players. But this is where, if you're looking at 7 and some of those big names are off the board that we've already talked about, this is where I think you start looking at how do we continue to fill gaps within our roster. So let's start with Derik Queen, freshman out of Maryland. Really came on through the tournament, really made a name for himself for the tournament. 6'9", 248. Like, outside of Zion, you are the biggest guy on the team. Like, he is a scoring hub. People compare him to like a Alperen Sengun, a Domantas Sabonis, a Boris Diaw. Like, talk to me about what you see out of Derik Queen, because like there's a lot of things to his game. And I'm like, the Pelicans could use that.
Yeah. I'm a big Derik Queen fan. He's grown on me. I wasn't, too high on him before the tournament started. I had heard how good he was and everything, but when I watched him, he reminded me a lot of the person who I just mentioned before, which is Jonas Valanciunas. But then I watched him during the tournament, and I watched him kind of do some things offensively that not a lot of big men around his size can do. He has really good feet, and he has really good hands. Now, he's not a huge shot blocker, and that brings me to where he would fit with the Pelicans. I think he's a power forward. I think he's a 4, and in cases small ball 5, like at the end of games, things like that. Because he's not a shot blocker. Like, he's not straight up and down shot blocker. He's more of, you stopped your man, the 5 stopped them, I'm coming over and I'm gonna get that block. Or the guard, the wing cut in front of him, I'm gonna come over and get that block. But if it's just like you coming at me straight up and down, that's not really his forte. What he does is he gets a lot of like the strip blocks, like you going up, I'm hitting it on the way up, and knocking it down. But he is an offensive hub. He is, give him the ball and, let him run things around, let people run around him, let, the cuts, the back cuts, the things like that. He is finding those guys and hitting those guys in there. He can fade up, face up and hit people with up and unders and drive past people. He has a lot of combos and ways to beat you. And if you want to beat that, I got a counter for that. He has a lot of those in him. And I think where he would fit in, and again, it goes into, the philosophy of the offense, of the coaching staff and the offense and things like that, is that number one, you would have to play him off the bench, and you would have to make sure that he has a center, behind him, or another big man on the floor with him. And also you would have to be okay sometimes letting him run the offense on, and run the offense through him. Not necessarily like every single time we're coming down and finding you like prime Tim Duncan or something like that. But come down, you initiate the offense from the low block, right? And so you're initiating the offense, you catch, you face up, people are cutting, there's weak actions going on the other side of the floor. You can use his facilitating ability to hit things like that. Or while that action is going on, he's good enough one-on-one to take guys, on that shot. And again, at 250, bro, like that is the kind of body that you need in the NBA to take those things in. If there's gonna be somebody that's gonna be able to contribute, to a team at the 7 position outside of Conconnipple, I think that Derik Queen is the guy that's going to be able, because he's going to be big enough to take the challenges of the NBA. And he has a lot of baby fat to him, meaning like he's still growing, he's still like maturing, he's still growing into his body, getting the baby fat off and getting the man strength down. If he's got a lot of that going for him, and I think he's a guy that has a lot of upside and a lot of things that we just talked about when the offense goes stale and you just don't have that guy that can do things in the post or get to the paint and draw defenses. He is a guy that can do that for you. I think a lot of like how the Bucks run Bobby Portis, how they use him. That is kind of what I see, the way that they could use a guy like Derik Queen. So I'm a fan of Derik Queen. I think if he's there, he's worth a look. Worth the discussion in the draft room, because I do think there are a lot of things that he's gonna, that he can bring. He's a guy that you're gonna have to give him opportunities to do things, and it might not be as polished as you want to see every single time, but it's a lot like Kelly Olynyk, and where it's not as pretty, but it's effective.
I would agree with you 100%. I think this would be the top choice for me if the Pelicans decide to go this route, if he is available and on the board when they pick, whenever that is, at 7 or whatever. Listen, he has a skill set that the team just doesn't have. There is no other player that does what he does at his body type. And to your point, I think it's going to take both some growth on his point, because again, I think a reason why you bring in a Joe Dumars is not just because he has connections with the NBA, but he's in a position to challenge people. And so from a freshman from Baltimore, you need to come in, and this is what I need from you, right? You got to be a top. You can't do the Zion bull for 6 years. You need to come, especially you're not going to be looked at as the franchise saver or nothing like that. You need to come in the best shape of your life, and we're going to force you to play defense. You want to get on the court like Trey Murphy and these guys that had to earn their way on, you're going to force you to play defense. Because I think it's there. To your point, his basketball IQ is really high. Both how he sees the game offensively and defensively. It's just sometimes he's lazy on the defensive end. We said the same thing about Zion, and all of a sudden he looked like he was a first team all defense candidate last season. Like, I don't know if Derik Queen has that talent because he doesn't have the athleticism to go with it. But if you're 6'9" and 250, you can get in the way. Like, you can be serviceable on the defensive end. So I think there's some growth there from that aspect. But then from the coaching staff and from the players aspect, I do think that the Pelicans want to be high flying, fly up the court, play with pace type team, defend on both ends type team, very similar to OKC and the Pacers. I think that's what would suit the Pelicans roster well. But I also think, to your point, having different ways to beat someone is important. So you need to be able to know how to adjust. An Isaiah Joe, who's not the greatest defender, but he's in your rotation because he gives you something different. I think you need to be able to do that as the Pelicans too, to say this player may not be the perfect prototype for what we're trying to run, but what he can give us in a situation when someone's shutting something else down in the half court where we've struggled for years and years when Zion's sitting down or whatever, I think that's something that you have to lean in. So not only would you kind of have to adjust like what you're looking like from a player archetype, but I also think you're going to have to give him the ball, right? Because if you look at how he plays, especially if he's coming off the bench in a role like that, he's better when he has the ball. He's able to face up, see the offense, and facilitate from there. Again, very similar to a Boris Diaw for, again, I guess we're showing our age there, to a Domantas Sabonis, guys who are playmakers out of the four position. That's a lot of what Derik Queen is. And so I think that skill set is very, very needed for this Pelicans team. You talk about Bobby Portis. I've been saying the Pelicans should go get Bobby Portis. So if you can get someone at 7 who's way cheaper, who's way younger, and has a ceiling or a potential that's untapped, I think you should kind of run to the board and do that. But again, it will depend on what you find out in your measurables. It will depend on what the Pelicans are looking for and what other moves they're doing, because it's not just the draft. It's what other trades or free agents might they be scooping up that could fill that role as well. So outside of him, again, I think both of us kind of agree that would be the best fit if everything falls as things are, which we know always happens in the NBA draft. The other player who has been growing on me, I'll be honest, is Khaman Maluach out of Duke, the center freshman, just had an outstanding year playing next to Cooper Flagg and Concanippo. This is hard because we just talked about how excited we are for Yves, Missi, and Karlo Matkovic and what they could do in year 2 and with a year underneath their belt. So then how would another center fall into that? He's 7'2" and 250, Garrett. There's no one on the Pelicans rosters that's 7 foot. There's no one there's no one that fits that bill right now. And he would immediately be the tallest person on the team. Everybody can say it. You can't teach 7 foot tall. Like, there's a finite amount of humans that are 7 foot tall on this planet, much less that are really good at the game of basketball. He is another rim runner. Some of the comps are like Yves Subak or Jakob Poeltl or Rudy Gobert and Mitchell Robinson. And like, you might look at those names and be like, that might not be what I want at pick 7 or whatnot. But it goes back to the conversation you and I had both on and off the pod in the past. If you're looking at a league that we just talked about has multiple 7-footers, multiple big guys, and they're only adding more and more to the league. Well, if you look around free agency and who people are willing to trade, it's not those guys. Those guys are not available for you to go acquire. Like Daniel Gafford wants $30 million and Nick Claxton wants $35 million to get 10 and 10 every game. Like, that's what those players cost because there's such a small, finite amount of that. And so if you're looking at the Pelicans and you're looking at, well, what's more feasible or what's more attainable? Another shooter, 6'5" shooter that can help us space the floor. Another, power forward, traditional or new age power forward that can kind of score a little bit on their own, or a 7-foot guy who can rim run at 19. Where can we find things and where can we not? And so, like, I look at that and I say, hey, if he's the best player on your scouting report, on your board, through all the research that you've done, you run up to the podium and you select them and you figure it out from there. Like, it's very similar to the Daniel Gaffer, the Derik. Like, put as much talent on the size on the roster as possible. Go to training camp and figure out how it all plays together, because I don't know another way that you would go secure a player like that without spending tons of capital either one way or the other. So what are your thoughts on a player like this who, again, similar in some ways to Yves Missi, but more traditional, I would say, than someone who could slide down potentially and play the four or something like that?
Yeah, he's bigger than Yves Missi. He's 7'2", 250. He's way bigger than Yves Missi. So, he is interesting to me because, I've told you off the pod that I would be apprehensive to draft him at 7, because you just drafted a similar player in Yves. And I think we just talked about how Yves, the only way Yves is going to get better is if he's infused with confidence, right? If he's given the opportunity to do, like you talk about, the demonstrated ability. And I always think about, the starting lineup and the finishing lineup. And I think about who plays at the beginning and who plays at the end. Obviously, there's a ton of game in between and things happen. And with the Pelicans, multiple people are going to be hurt. Multiple people are going to be out. And so you absolutely want to have as many of those people, in that situation. What up, Lito? Yeah, you want to have as many of those people. My problem is, if you draft him at 7, all right, and you have just gotten bigger, you absolutely have addressed what we just talking about. At the end of games or at the beginning of games, one of those guys or Karlo will not be playing if it's healthy. And I just don't know if at 7, that's the kind of blockade you want to put in front of guys who may already fill some of those positions, but you're giving a lot of that to, because if you draft him at 7, he has to play. He has to play. Like he has to play. He can't just sit. It's not a Reece Shepard situation where you just have so many talented players that he just sits. This is going to be more of, well, you're really talented and you're probably better than like Karlo, but like we have what you do in Yves, and we drafted him earlier, so we kind of got to play him to see if it's there, or like look to trade him. There's just a lot of questions at that point where I think you could do better by saying, okay, yeah, you draft Concaniple, and like, yeah, you might be able to find Luke Kennard or whatever the case is, but at least he fits into the team, and then you never know what might happen. We saw the Lakers try to trade 2 firsts for Mark Williams, to go to your point. I agree. And Mark and immediately had buyer's remorse. Immediately. We know what happened. So like, you are 1000% correct that players are, those kind of players are hard to find. And so if you get an opportunity to get one, you do it. I just go to the Pelicans' uniqueness, where you do need to add size, but you don't need to add another guy who might be a project and need to learn the game for another 2 years, until he's ready to play. Because again, this is another guy. You think Yves is raw. He didn't start playing in South Sudanese till he was 16 years old, right? And so like that, these are another raw guy. Now he's a much better free throw shooter than Yves. Oh God, much better, right? Like so there is some ceiling that could be there. But at 7, I think that this is an opportunity for you to add somebody who can add to the team without taking away from someone else. We talk about Concaniple. There's nobody on the team other than Jordan Hawkins, and he, with his back issues, you don't know if he's available. That's a knockdown roaming shooter like Concaniple can be, and also have the ability to run some offense through them. You don't have that on the team. Talk about Derik Queen. Talk about that one kind of skill position that maybe, but you don't have that like moving forward. Kelly Olynyk is not going to be in New Orleans for the rest multiple years. So to have a guy that can come in and do that Bobby Porter's role where you don't have that on the team, it won't take away from Yves and from Kelly, because he'll be doing something totally different than those people. So he, again, at 7, I don't really think that you can. I mean, you can miss really badly. You can.
Oh,
We've
I'm about to
seen
say,
that happen
hold on
before.
now.
Yeah,
You
But
can miss
with the
one.
Pelican situation, no kidding, no kidding. But with the Pelican situation, with this person not having to come in and lift the whole, rise all of the boats, he's not the tide to rise all boats. I think that if you go for that and your reasoning is what you said, like you said so eloquently, like you just can't find 7'2" people who can rim run and block shots, any just out there. And if he's better than Yves, then you just make that decision when you make that decision. If that's something that I could get on board with that, I just think that for me, Derik Queen and Khaman are more my flavor of draft pick at this point in time for this team than him, than Maluach coming in, being so raw and having to learn the game on the fly, and just having a guy who also needs another year to learn the game and things. It is, especially we just talked about with Herb not being the youngest, Trey not, like, these guys are young, but they're not 20, they're not 19, they're not 20. You got to start kind of competing and doing some things.
Here's my only kind of argument to that, and I'll break this up. 2 things. You brought it up. Kelly Olynyk's not going to be here very long. So
no, he's not.
He's got a short number of years left in the league. So then quickly it becomes Yves and Karlo very quickly. And again, I don't know if that's going to be enough to battle Isaiah Hartenstein. And now I don't want to see Yves or Karlo on Jokic or Aaron Gordon or any of those. Like, that is a torture chamber waiting to happen. And so for me, what if, again, into the theme of what we've been talking about this summer, what if, Kelly Olynyk or Karlo are your 4, and Yves, Missi, or, Khaman are your 5. And everyone else just bumps down a spot. And so you always have rim protection. You always have a tall 4 who can shoot or space the floor. I would be okay with that mindset. And I could understand how the Pelicans got there. Because to your point, in a year or 2 or halfway through the year, if you figure out that, one player is better than the other, and someone else is screaming, we need a 5, we need a center, and they are like, yeah, we'll give you two draft picks, 2 first-round picks, and 2 young players for your center, then that's a situation that figures itself out at that point. And so I always think, again, you should try to acquire the things that are harder to acquire. Because, yes, I do agree, while Khaman has a skill set that can help this team right away, I would kind of argue that Antonio Reeves has some movement shooter to it. I would kind of argue that, like, Luke Kennard's a free agent. There are guys like that can be had. Yeah, you might pay more for them, but there's no guys, 7-foot guys, that you could go pay more for that's just on the free agent mark. So, like, that would be my only kind of counter to how someone could be like, well, there's too many centers in the. That's a crazy thing to say, because in the last offseason we're like, the Pelicans have no centers. Now it's like, no, you can't add another one. Stuff like that. So again, I think with the draft coming up in just a couple weeks, the finals are about to get started. You're seeing, again, the playoffs are telling you the story of what moves need to be made and how people are going to adjust to go take down OKC in the West, go take down Indiana in the East. Again, the Zion stuff, again, there's always something. You'll let things play out and figure out however they play out with the courts, with the lawyers and things like that. You hope it's not true, because if not, yikes, the Pelicans are in big trouble. But on top of that, what you got left for the people, as again, we close out this season, please get the season over with and move into a very, very, very interesting offseason.
Get this season over with. Yeah, all right. The Pelicans didn't even wait to the offseason. We got bored. The playoffs is just when we got bored. Let's stir some shit up. Let's just stir some shit up. But as always, you never know what people are going through. So give someone a smile today. First, also happy Pride Month to all the people that support. My love to everybody. Everybody deserves to be happy and to be safe. So yeah, man, it's the finals are here, and I yearn for the days that the Pelicans can get to these levels, and we can cover a team that is doing things on the court and not worry so much about what they're doing off the court. Because if this playoffs doesn't grab Zion by his collar and slap him in the face and say, look at Tyrese Halliburton, look at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, look at Anthony Edwards, look at Jalen Brunson, look at Jason Tate, look at all of these guys. Luka was in the finals last year. Look at all of these guys that are zooming past you as far as career achievements go. And some of them aren't as good as you. They just aren't. You have all the talent in the world. If these playoffs don't show you that the basketball stage is screaming for a locked-in, healthy Zion to get all this foolishness, then there will be nothing. There will be nothing to do it. So with that being said, as always, follow myself at Garrick_Rattler. Follow my brother at Raphael_Rattler. Follow the page at NO_basketball, no E. That's on Twitter, Instagram, wherever you get your social medias. Most importantly, subscribe to NewOrleans.basketball, and we'll see you guys next time.